Lilith is easily one of the strongest sirens in the Borderlands universe, but even she had to go through her own trials in the first game to get where she is now. Since then, she has taken more of a helpful role for each of the Vault Hunters that have came after her, seeing less and less of actual combat. Which had me wondering, if Lilith had been the siren that woke up in the snow, instead of Maya, could she have accomplished the same things if she was given the same resources? Well, I just had to find out. But we won't be guessing at it with gear pieces and weapons to get as close as we can, no. With the help of a mod created by 55 Tumble over on Nexus Mods, we will truly become Lilith in this playthrough. The classic phase walk returns as we sprint by our enemies in stealth and come out of it with an explosion of energy. A complete overhaul of the siren replaces Maya's skill tree with the same one Lilith sported in the first game, bringing a return to powerful skills like Slayer and Phoenix. But it doesn't stop there. All of the siren comms have been reworked to replicate the ones that were found in the first Borderlands. And lastly, but certainly not least, a model and audio swap that truly brings this package together. You can find this mod linked down in the description, and I encourage anyone interested to check it out. But without further delay, let's hop right into it. We start things off by digging Claptrap out of the snow, and starting up the classic fight with Knuckle Dragger, utilizing the Gearbox SMG in Lilith fashion to mow him down before smacking him in the face. Before we can get into the skill tree, this run will go just about like any other, clearing Liarsburg of the usual filth and getting the power back on. I figured it would probably be best to fix that as quick as possible, so I grabbed the first two side quests, cleaning out the local bullymongs and getting their hair. I had meant to turn it in for the sniper, but I accidentally clipped on old Clappy here and ended up with the shotgun, which turned out to be a Hulk, so it wasn't too shabby overall. Donning his new mohawk, we continue escorting Claptrap before coming to the first fight, Boom Boom. I make quick work of the little boom and finally get level 5, which gives us access to Phase Walk, which does absolutely nothing to Big Bertha. So I throw on the Hulk and finish things up with the bigger boom. A Lilith-styled cannon shot sends Claptrap sky high, and like always, puts a big old grin on my face. Taking advantage of Phase Walk and the boosted crit from Slayer, it doesn't take us very long before we start the fight with everyone's favorite Captain Flint. While Phase Walk doesn't do the most damage at this point, my shotgun certainly does, as a few shots easily fells Captain Flint. So we hop on the SS Claptrap and head on to the next area, where, in usual fashion, we hop into our car and eventually make our way over to the Marrow Field, somehow managing to not immediately end Corporal Reese with the blast from Phase Walk. But with his sacrifice and my own hard work, the shields of Sanctuary are back up and we find ourselves making shady deals with Earl. Just like old times. Anyways, it's off to the Firehawk, and my head starts to feel a bit fuzzy as we approach the ever-impending paradox. Tearing our way through our alternate self's cult, I make a quick pit stop and pick up the Lascaux SMG, an absolute powerhouse of an early game weapon. And before we know it, we're looking at ourselves stumbling on the ground, desperate for the next fix. So naturally, we help myself up, and if I could, I would smack myself around to get them clean. Thankfully, however, I can also phase walk and show myself just how bright, loud, and annoying this ability is during this fight. We get the rest of the bandits cleaned up, and my other self needs one last fix before we leave the area, thinking how glad we were that we didn't go down that path this time. But before we head on to the Bloodshot Stronghold, I had a couple of side quests in mind. First up was In Memoriam, a quest about how I faked my own death, further adding to the self-identity dilemma. The final kill Bull, however, drops the fastball, an insanely good grenade mod that chucks the nade directly at the enemies, dealing a ton of damage. Next up was Assassinate the Assassins, a quest where you clear out a nest of bandits. I really just did this because I like this quest, and I kind of needed the XP. But I did get a bunch of the rare drops, which are solid weapons overall. With my new toys, it was back to the main quest, sending me out to the dust to gather car parts for a bandit technical. And this has got to be wrong in some way or another, but it feels right at the same time, so we'll just roll with it. So I breach my way into the stronghold gates, and the small fry bandits stand little chance, with Badmaw faring no better, getting smoked by a fastball 1-2 combo. You know, phase walking around the stronghold was extremely satisfying, as it let me start fights in places that I wouldn't normally be able to. Mad Mike gets a little confused after I go invisible and dies before I think he realized what actually happened. Around this point, we start finding some class mods that will hopefully add some more identity to the way that we play. Roland gets yoinked by the Warden, and we make our way to the top of the dam. The boosted crit damage from Lilith's Slayer skill makes tearing through these loaders a breeze as we make our way out to the end, where the Warden manages to down us, but it doesn't really matter as the Lascaux shreds through its eye. With the Warden dead, I clean out the remnants of its forces before heading back to Sanctuary, where I get to see myself being desperate with Roland, It's just sad, really. I respec for a Tempest Calm that I found, hopefully finding some good shock weapons. As I make my way out to the Tundra Express, I make good use of the speed from Phase Walk to help me get back the badonkadonks for Tina, clearing out a few extra bandits on the way out. Tina and I blow up the train and I head up to the wreckage, where I find a Spectre mod that boosts sniper damage and the Slayer skill, one that I'll make sure to use later on. I have a pretty good time clearing out the trash that blocks me from the Wilhelm fight before finally making the jump down there to face him. I was gonna try and make this fight a little bit more interesting, but the fastball was just too juicy and nukes almost all of his HP. So I mop it up with my shotgun and wipe my hands clean. On the bright side, I did get the Rolling Thunder to drop, so that's kinda cool. After that, I figured I'd stop using the fastball as it was a bit too strong. So I thought of the Splinter Group side quests to get a more fitting grenade mod for my class setup. I make my way back to the stronghold and dive into its sewers, delivering a pizza of death to the Borderlands version of the Ninja Turtles. And of course, killing Master Flinter. I farmed them up a few times before finally getting the aforementioned Stormfront, a powerful shot grenade mod that should pair nicely with our Tempest Calm. But with that little detour aside, we plug in the false shield, juice up our counterpart, and off goes Sanctuary, flying off into the distance as the other Lilith accidentally sent us back to the ground. Yeah, I bet. When we make our way to the fridge, I wanted to check out how the Stormfront might perform, with the boosted damage from Lilith's skills. And oh my lord, do these poor rats just absolutely melt. With this setup, it might actually just be better than the fastball. Sanctuary pops back into existence as we enter the Highlands, and I can see the Radiant skill putting in work against these stalkers as they get fried from simply being in Phase Walk. Then I make sure the bridge doesn't fall down so I can just walk my way across and get past this constructor. And I really can't help but just be amused as the big Thresher just melts as soon as he comes up. But before long, it was back to the beacon defense of Bright Light's Flying City, as I used the ammo machine to constantly throw out Stormfronts, which alongside the Rock Salt shotgun I got from the TMT quests, made this normally rather tedious mission actually kind of enjoyable. And the fast travel finally comes down, so I rejoined the squad back on Flying Sanctuary. Up next was the Wildlife Preservation, but I had a certain treasure-related side quest in mind that would give us a nice sniper to use with that Spectre Calm we found a while back. In the good, the bad, and the Mordecai, I tracked down Carson in the Gulag, after learning about a buried treasure where we find ourselves stuck in a three-way standoff with myself, Gettle, and Mobley. Gettle of whom, after several attempts, drops the insanely good legendary sniper, Lyuda. And with that powerhouse in tow, a quick respec turns us into Sniper Lilith, so off we go to the Preserve, where we meet up with Mordecai, and he tells us what we should do as I simply ignore him and start mowing through the various enemies in our way. This Sniper Lilith setup was proving to be pretty strong. The normally tanky super badass loader gets absolutely demolished from only a few shots. Before coming here, I made sure to pick up the Doctor's Order side quest, which enables us to open these 4 boxes for a guaranteed loot midget each. So I got to farming, in the hopes that I would get a legendary class mod, but I actually ended up with much more. The more relevant of things I got was a Skullmasher, a higher level Stormfront, and the Eridium Warrior legendary Calm, which, funny enough, I ended up just not using and went with the Spectre Calm I already had. With those upgrades, I was finally at the Bloodwing fight, which, as you can see, only took a shot or 2 in each phase from the Skullmasher before, well, you know how this goes. Back on Sanctuary, I smacked Claptrap with his upgrades, angry he lost his Mohawk, and grabbed the Law Revolver from this short little detective quest. The Law gives a 100% boost to melee, and I thought it might be useful should I ever try an Executioner build, which, fickle as I am, immediately spec into, getting a lot of damage from the Phase Strike skill. Inside of Thousand Cuts, I got to test it out, where normal melees definitely did a lot of damage, and whatever got hit by Phase Strike certainly died. But my cooldown reduction wasn't really there, and it was hard to keep it up all the time. In the throne room, however, with enemies in much closer proximity, not only was the damage from melee putting in work, but the blast from Phase Walk was also dealing significant numbers. Brick and I, just like old times, melee our way through various mortar beacons, and he accepts me as a slab, the greatest of all honors. Nextly, I had to go and get the voice modulator from Opportunity, sticking to the melee strategy for just a bit longer. I take out the body double and begin to realize that this Phase Strike style of play was actually a lot of fun, but probably needed more skill points and gear to be more viable. So I grab the recordings, make the modulator, and head on back, making it time for the traditional ascent up the mountain to the bunker. But there was no way I would be doing that with an Executioner build. So I threw on a mercenary class mod that would boost my proficiency with SMGs and went over to Moxie, tipping her until she gave me her corrosive SMG. That should make this part much more enjoyable. I meet up with Clappy and he graciously drops the death barrier for me. And as I start to kill the loaders, I can see that getting this SMG was absolutely worth it. The combination of Lilith's skills and this SMG allowed me to cut through things like they were butter. But as usual, the true boss, that is the badass constructor, was being annoying as usual, so I let myself go down in front of it and sprayed the Lyuda into its eye, wrapping that up nicely. Once I made it to the top, the auto turrets fell very quickly and I was already looking at the bunker as it flew around me. I really wasn't too sure how well this fight would actually go, but it really ended up being not that bad. You certainly couldn't call it the fastest kill or anything by any means, but I got the job done regardless. Unfortunately, there were no cool drops here. Afterwards, even Lilith would have enjoyed the huge drop down the Angel elevator, but I foolishly rode on it like a moron. In the Angel room, the various loaders that Jack stood in our warpath really stood no chance. As the other Lilith joins us, I start to get a headache again, but before long, the Faker and Roland get down the last Eridium pump shield, and I take it out, unfortunately leading to the death of Angel and Roland. But on the plus side, Jack did take away the other Lilith, so that's something, I guess. With few true losses, we head on over to the Eridium Blight, where we immediately get deflected back over to the Sawtooth Cauldron. In there, we find that the mercenary build continues to shine, as we use a combination of all the weapons we have to shred through the 4 ambush commanders and the little gremlins that surround them. Phasewalk allows us to get close to these turrets before they even really knew we were there. But with his whip now burning in pieces, Mortar comes out and meets a timely demise. Everything up top fell about the same as it did below, so we grabbed the Odomo charges and made our way over to the Arid Boneyard. There, we popped the pipe with the Lilith mobile and gained access to where Lilith's original journey started, Firestone. But before we could really make much more progress, I had to go farm some levels. And in normal mode, the dust actually scales with the player, so I went back to our good friends Ghetto and Mobley, collecting XP and a higher level Lyuda while we were at it. Back to Firestone, when approaching the Saturn fight, I for some reason thought that trying to kill it with the Executioner build would be kind of fun. But when I realized that doing so would take literally forever, I decided I would just use the Lyuda and spare myself the suffering. I did melee my way through some of the peons up to the data dump, where I grabbed the data and we approached the end of this run. But before I left Firestone, I thought it would be fitting that Lilith paid homage to TK Baja by getting the Lady Fist for the Warrior. For those of you who may not know, the Lady Fist sports a whopping 800% boost to its crit damage, and I'm guessing that paired with the crit damage from Slayer should do nicely. Back to Sanctuary though, I immediately go to Claptrap. It doesn't matter what character we're playing as, I'm only going to talk to him. I'm not trying to get the random trash that the NPCs have laying around. But I did make a pit stop and get the Fire SMG from Moxie. Just kinda hoping it might be useful, since we actually have a pretty good mercenary comm going on. The poor loaders sent out to defend the gates stood very little chance against the Lady Fist and the Lyuda, both of which helped me clear the way to the Hero's Pass. Along the pass, it almost feels like old times as Mordecai, Brick, and I slaughter the unfortunate in our path, only missing a certain soldier. Towards the end, I utilized the phasewalk speed and jump straight into the final chamber, where I once again look onto the scenery and can see myself in the distance, thinking this is where it all ends. Jumping straight down into the gauntlet, I face off against Handsome Jack, making short work of his clones and shield with the Stormfront and a shock sniper that I happened to find. Where it turns out, I actually found a use for Moxie's Fire SMG after all, burning Jack down to a crisp. In desperation, Jack sends out his trump card, the Warrior. Things get started off with a quick volley from the Lyuda, which does a very significant amount of damage with a single clip. Lilith's Slayer and Quicksilver skills were really putting in work here. But I swapped over to the original plan, the Lady Fist, and while it does do reasonable damage, I think I didn't have quite the right build here to really make it shine. So back to the Lyuda plan it was, where after a few different volleys and some more help from the Lady Fist, the Warrior was at 1 HP. I thought it would be really cool to end it with a face strike, which I did. But I also got crushed by its head in the end. As I shamefully walked back, I began to think what an in-game build for Lilith might look like, thinking it could actually be quite strong. But that's a journey for another time. After calling down the moonshot, I grab my loot and contemplate letting the other Lilith finish off Jack, as in the end, she was indeed myself, but ultimately I decide that I was the superior version. And with that nasty bit of business done, I had my answer. Though Lilith has taken a different road in the true timeline, If she had been the one facing Borderlands 2's challenges, I believe that she would have stood the test of time. This mod was a lot of fun, so if you're still around, thanks for watching and good luck out there.